Welcome to the first session of the fall semester for Credit for Prior Learning. I'm Cassie Bradley. I have been at EKU for about 25 years now. And I recently, in the last year and a half or so, began working on initiating and implementing and embedding credit for prior learning opportunities into all aspects of the university here at EKU. And I'm actually housed under the provost office over in the Coates building. So we'll go ahead and get started. First of all, CPL, you're going to see that quite a bit through this presentation, but it stands for Credit for Prior Learning. And I'll go over what it is and what it is not here in just a little bit. But first of all, the information session that you're in right now is part of a Credit for Prior Learning series that the FCT&L has allowed me to use this wonderful space to present information both in an in-person and online format. These are the sessions that are currently lined up for this semester. We'll probably do this again in the spring. Today is the overview. And again, I'm going to do recordings. I'm going to try to do recordings for each session so that if someone misses a session due to class scheduling or just unavailable to attend, then they'll still be able to catch it. And then they can email me if you have any questions afterwards. We're going to do the casting the narrative, just to give you a little bit of information on that. That is looking at an asset forward approach to thinking about credit for prior learning and how it can benefit our students, how it is involved and embedded into the strategic plan, as well as how it creates efficiencies for faculty and staff. Connecting the non-collegiate learning to academic credit, that's specifically going to focus on academic agreements, MOUs, articulation agreements with entities that are both off campus and on campus. So basically this structure of this whole session, this information session, is that this session will provide a brief overview of all the different areas, and then each specific section after that will go into a specific area of credit for prior learning. So we'll have academic agreements. The JST, if you're not familiar with that, that's a joint service transcript. And that is kind of a transcript that most military, I think except Air Force and one other entity, I'm no expert on that. But I will be bringing in an expert for that session. Ben Thomas and Nick Wenzel will be joining us for that to go into the nuances and the complexities of applying the JST to our EKU student transcripts. Understanding credit by exam. I'm going to bring Samantha Pierce from the Office of Articulation and Transfer in with that. She's the expert on credit by exam. Now that's non-departmental exam, not related to departmental exams. She knows about that. She's very well aware of it. But these are specifically things like CLEP, and we'll go through that here in just a bit. On October 30th, our last scheduled session for this, we're going to look at portfolios. And I know if you all have heard anything about credit for prior learning, that's usually the biggest topic, but it's not one that we see a whole lot here at EKU in the traditional sense that you think of a portfolio. We're going to start off that session, that double session, with a faculty and leadership panel. So we'll have some chairs, a couple of deans, hopefully. I haven't gotten confirmation from everyone, but we'll have some leadership and faculty input on that. The hurdles, the goals, the things that make it easier, some recommendations, some suggestions, stories. It's a really interesting, we incorporated that last semester and it worked out really well. And then we're going to follow up after that with a basic overview of the credit for prior learning portfolio process. And that'll just be the regular session. We also may fill in a couple of things here and there. So be on the lookout. There'll be some EKU Today announcement. The Faculty Center for Teaching and Learning has a newsletter that they're very happy to spotlight some of our credit for prior learning information sessions. So if we have any added to this, I'll definitely keep you guys abreast of that throughout the semester. So does anyone have any questions so far? Let me see what this is. Is the last session date correct? The 30th? Is that not a Thursday?
She asked, I think, Cassie, because the both sessions both were listed as October 30th, the last two that are on the agenda. So
Yeah, and I thought there were two separate sessions. I thought, oh, what?
Yeah, so one of them will be, and I'll follow up with the resources. So one of them, I believe, is gonna be at 10, maybe 10:30. No, I think it's at 10. I had to move them. I had all the dates set, and then I got my teaching schedule because I teach this fall. So I had to shift everything around because I teach on Tuesday, Thursday this semester. So I think one of them starts at 10 and the other one starts at 11. So we do them
Okay.
back to back, but they're the same day. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much.
Good question. Okay, so what is credit for prior learning? Credit for prior learning is, we're getting this push towards not only the climate of students that we have, but we also recognize that learners are going to have educational experiences outside of the college setting that are just as beneficial, if not more, or they can enhance our classrooms with the things that they're bringing into the classroom. Many times they have met the course learning objectives through experiences, certifications, specific trainings that they've had. And if they can demonstrate that, then we want to make sure that they are not wasting, university courses are not a waste of time, but that they're spending their time and their money on courses, not to have to sit through and relearn things that they already know. So the fact that we have this position and we're doing this, it's demonstrating EKU's continuing dedication to our students, and by finding ways to apply that to the transcript, that shows that we recognize it and value the knowledge that they're bringing into our classrooms. One of the things that I spend a lot of time doing is reviewing the practices, and that we adopt practices that are approved with our accreditations through SAC-COC. We do have policies in place, or SACS has policies in place that outline the way that we recognize non-collegiate instruction and non-collegiate experiences on the academic transcript. So SAC-COC, one of the things that I do a lot of is making sure that we're in compliance with that, and all the processes that we have are in compliance with that and documented. And we'll go over more of that here in just a second. The benefits of credit for prior learning. I know when I started doing this like a year ago or more, a lot of people were like, we're just giving away classes for free. Or why is this benefiting? This is no good for EKU. This is no good, So some of the benefits, I'll tell a little bit about how EKU benefits the workforce and then our students for sure. Obviously, we're going to have accelerated degree completion. So there was a study done, and a lot of the information on the screen, I've linked to the resource at the very back of this presentation if you want to check it out. It's called the PLA Boost, and a group called CALE, which is the Council on Experiential Adult and Experiential Learning, sorry. They are kind of the national leaders in the area of credit for prior learning and prior learning assessment. They got together with kind of our equivalent of SAC-COC, but WICHE. And I think it was sponsored by the Lumina Foundation. If you've been in education for a while, then you're aware of all the work that the Lumina Foundation does. So this study had about 72 institutions and approximately 465,000 students. So it was a pretty significant study that was done. And the accelerated degree completion that I list on these benefits, the completion rate when students came in with prior learning assessed and applied to their transcript, they had a credential completion rate of 49%. Whereas those that came in without any kind of prior learning that had been assessed and articulated on their transcript were only at about 27%. So we know the benefit. It's an accelerated degree completion. It's going to save them a lot of money. This study was anywhere from 1,500 to 10,000, based on, obviously some institutions cost more, some of them are private, some of them are public. So it spanned a lot of different types of institutions. Now I know a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of money to be thrown out the window. What we do know is that, the motivation and persistence that they experience, they end up taking, since they're not having to have repeat courses or repeat courses that have information they already know, and it reduces that redundancy. These students that come in with credit for prior learning or have credit for prior learning applied after they get to us, they, on an average, they take anywhere from more than 15 to 17 more credits than the average student that does not have prior learning or credit for prior learning once they get here. So they're more focused, they're more motivated. And I'm not saying that our other students are not motivated, but they're more motivated because we have recognized, or we have a way of recognizing that credit for prior learning, that it is valuable to their degree completion as well. EKU benefits, because I know that you know, a lot of folks focus in on that anywhere from 15 to 10,000 that students save on average. However, and plus it gets them out the door quicker. However, like I said, this research and most of the research around the country have indicated that they end up taking more classes because they're not spending their time in classes that they already know the information. So we're going to have increased enrollment, increased retention, because we retain these students. They've been out in the workforce. They're motivated. A lot of them, their jobs and their livelihood depend on getting a degree completion. It also builds stronger community and industry partnerships. We're working with several entities on how we can create pathways for workforce development and other things in our community that will allow our students to finish that credential or to start a credential. Yay, I like the hand clap. I'm excited about that too. So we also are gaining a reputation, and I don't know if you all have heard anything about this. I have recently begun doing a lot of things with the Council on Post-Secondary Ed, which is our guiding body here at EKU for the state. And I'm doing a lot of work with them, and I'm not sure if you know this, but this is pretty cool that EKU is one of the furthest along as far as credit for prior learning. EKU has the only credit for prior, solely dedicated credit for prior learning coordinator, me, a full-time person dedicated to the processes and efficiencies, and just someone totally dedicated to a sole person for credit for prior learning. We are going to, I'm actually working with them next week. I'm doing some presentations at the University of Louisville. Louisville's been doing this a while, and this is from their own person's mouth, that they're still not as advanced as far as we are as recognizing credit for prior learning in our policies, in our procedures. And it's a wonderful place to be because we're kind of leading the way as far as credit for prior learning. A lot of other institutions are looking to EKU for that. So that's definitely a feather in EKU's cap, because we're starting this before I think eventually it's going to be mandated. That's just my personal opinion. It's not anywhere near there, written anywhere, but SAC-COC, I think, are going to start requesting that there's transparency about opportunities for credit for prior learning on websites and for students, potential students, current students, and for faculty and staff. And obviously having a credit for prior learning position solely dedicated to credit for prior learning allows us to build in resources and efficiencies for faculty and staff. Whereas before, I know that I worked with one of the associate deans years ago, 15 years ago or more, that it was just different people that were interested in it, working on it all over campus. And so one department may do it one way, and then another college might do it a different way. And then some people say we don't do it at all. And so this is bringing efficiency and standardization to as much as we can, so that faculty and advisors are able to reach out to those resources efficiently. And then obviously the workforce is going to be enhanced. They're looking at re-credentialing and upskilling. We're just starting to talk with some workforce development initiatives to where you know, how can we get those students in our doors, and how can we get them credentialed, because there's nothing worse than knowing that you can do something and not being able to because you don't have that credential. Also, the state is working. I don't know if you all are, I think it's 60 by 30. To where we have a lot of students, I'd say about 90%, 90, probably 95% of our students that inquire about credit for prior learning, they are actually, they have some type of college or some college, but they have not completed their degree. Life's gotten in the way, not in the way, but you know, life happens, kids come along, house payments are due, car payments are due, and then now they have all these credits and no degree. So CPE, I know, is working to make sure that about 60% of our folks have some sort of post-secondary credential, either a university certificate, an associate's degree, something like that. So this is a great way to offer our students that have that credential and they see the value, maybe they're out in the workforce now and they see the value where they didn't before. And they may even have employers that can come and pay, that can pay this. You know, pay for their time off or whatever. We've also built in some to remove some hurdles for financial reasons as well. And we'll go over those. So these are the different types of portfolio assessment that we have here at EKU. A lot of people hear portfolio and they think that's the only way to do credit for prior learning. I have only seen one in the last 18 months or so. An actual portfolio for experiential learning. The portfolio that I see the most of are related to industry and workforce credentials. So that's like someone who's already had a licensure or a certification out in the workforce. And those are very easy. And we'll go over those in a little bit. I'll touch base briefly on those, and then we'll go into more depth on those in the session specifically about articulation and academic agreements. Military and training experiences, we have a lot of veterans that come and they have that joint service transcript, and a lot of that is automatically plopped into their transcripts. A lot of times it's sitting in electives. We're working to streamline that process and to make it better to where a lot of our learners are not, they don't have a whole lot, they're not got a lot of credit sitting in their electives to where they're running in danger of being in satisfactory academic progress issues. So we're working together with that, doing some really neat things there. I'm excited about that. I think it'll bring a lot of efficiencies and it'll be a better student experience. Work experience and training, obviously, that's going to be through those certifications and trainings. A lot of law enforcement, fire, EMS, things like that. We're starting to move into the teaching area of that as well. Industry certifications and licensures. Again, we see this a lot in fire safety, OSHA, EMS. We recently have a new agreement with a child development associate. So we're learning all kinds of new areas and new things are coming up. All the students ask, and then that gets the ball rolling on, is this something we need to do here at EKU? Non-collegiate courses and trainings. These are those things, and I know you guys have probably heard about it. Sophia, Straighter Line, some of those courses, they're a lot of subscription based, and they're taking their courses there and then wanting to transfer them here. We have processes in place for that, and we're working to streamline those even more this fall. We're going to be looking at ways that we can do that efficiently without jeopardizing the integrity of our coursework. Internships and apprenticeships, again, those are another way that we can examine prior learning, and then standardized departmental exams like CLEP, AP, things like that. Anybody have any other questions about that so far? Great. Okay, so why are we establishing these procedures? We know that students are seeking these opportunities. I talked to one student very early on and I asked him how he heard of EKU and credit for prior learning. And he said that he had typed in, I'm looking for the most affordable university to complete my degree. Can you give me a list? And EKU was number 2. So EKU is in the hot spot right now for opportunities. And I always use this, this visualization. Is there some sort of virtual water cooler out there that, like, you know, students are, once one starts with one area that we haven't heard of, like, I'll get 15 more requests. Do you all do this? I heard that you all review this. And the difference a lot of times than other universities is we're not charging anything to do this. We're trying to get things in place to where it's a very streamlined process to where it doesn't take up a lot of time. But they know this, the people out there that are searching these type of opportunities, they know this. So that's just one more way we can make sure that we're getting students in our doors into our programs. We know that students persist through graduation, have higher employment rates with increased earnings, and that's good for everybody. That's good for consumers. That's good for parents that are wanting to make sure that their students get an education at a great value and are employable after they leave and can afford a house payment, car payment, whatever their life goals are. It removes hurdles for students. And it removes hurdles for faculty and staff by building efficiencies in place. And I'll talk more about that here in just a second. I actually had one last week that came up. It made me feel really good. It's like, okay, it's actually working. Consistency in process and procedure. This is a slow process, but I think the culture around EKU is changing. It's changed in the last 6 months to a year. People know what credit for prior learning is. They're aware of it, and they know that there's a person on campus that can help them with this or get them started. So it's slowly but surely creeping into all the areas of campus to where it's just another attribute for our students. Documentation and compliance. So one of the other sides, that even though it's the right thing to do, it's the good thing to do for our students and our faculty. We also have to make sure that we have evidence of subject matter expert reviews for documentation and compliance for SAC COC and other accreditors in our specific disciplines. So a lot of people ask, what is collegiate level credit? Collegiate level credit may look different within the disciplines. So what might be collegiate level, it doesn't fit in one box. So history is going to be a lot different than nursing in those collegiate levels. One of the things that our policy or our small p policy is what Dr. Weiss would say if she was up here, our regulations is that faculty must be the subject matter experts who evaluate collegiate level learning and when it's appropriate for collegiate level learning to be applied. The processes assist in documenting faculty vetted awarding of the, so in our processes to make sure that we're being compliant, we also need to make sure that we're documenting that the faculty have vetted this either on the front end through the articulation agreement process or on the back end through the portfolio and SLO learning outcomes. Some of the examples are the articulation agreements that I will lay out here pretty soon. Our academic regulation that guides all the things with credit for prior learning is Academic Reg 4.2.1 on academic credit. And you all may have seen this in the last week or so. It just came up. I think it's getting ready to wrap up its 10-day comment period. One of the really great things about this is that the amount and level of academic credit, that's what's outlined in that regulation. So faculty, if you're looking for the guidelines on how to determine the amount and level of academic credit, you can go to that. If you look up academic regulation 4.2.1 on the policy website, it'll be right there. I also have some resources I'll share with you on that. The credit, these are the main headers of that regulation. Credit by non-EKU transcript. That's going to be your transfer courses, your gen ed courses, or previously unevaluated courses. So some of our military credits, maybe they've got that credit on their military transcript. However, it hasn't been articulated by our faculty or other faculty. So that's when they're going to bring that in. And then the most exciting part that I thought of this recent edition of this revamping of 4.2.1 is that we added an entire section for credit for prior learning. So that way, we actually have a policy, and that speaks volumes to the importance of credit for prior learning at EKU, is that we actually have an academic regulation that outlines the importance of that. That's going to go over military credit, academic agreements, exams, portfolios, and things like that. Hopefully, you've had a chance to look at that. If not, go back and look at it before they close out that comment policy timeline. I think it's getting ready to close maybe tomorrow. I'm not sure on that. but it'll be posted soon. If you don't see the credit for prior learning in there, it's not the new one. So we're excited about that. Again, this is just a slide. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail on this, but this just lets you know that this is like some excerpts from the credit or the policy 4.2.1. It lays out how many minutes, what's expected for the credit hour. And the biggest piece that I always lean on with credit for prior learning is not only is it good for the student, but is there a way for faculty, have we documented that faculty have the primary responsibility for determining that level and number of credit hours to the coursework? Those are the subject matter experts. Those are the experts in their discipline. And it's in our academic policy. It's also listed in SAC COC's policies. So these are the types of things that we have to consider when we're looking at credit for prior learning and whether it can be applied. There are some areas of campus that cannot, based on their specific accreditations through their disciplines. I know law might be one of those because their ABA, the American Bar Association, and the Kentucky Bar Association, those have to be, if they're taking courses through EKU, they have to be in person or, direct contact hours. So there may be some limitations to it, but these are the types of things that we consider when looking at credit for prior learning opportunities. The thing that keeps some parameters on this and keeps it from going out of control is that we go by the residency requirement. And so they're not going to be able to transfer an entire degree in here. Especially if they haven't earned one yet, they're not going to be able to, bring in 115 credits. They are limited. We go by, again, the residency, just like every other program, they have to have at least, they can transfer up to 75% for undergraduate and 33 1/3, which is 1/3 of their non-EKU credit. And that can be transferred from other areas or whatever. 1/3 of it, or 2/3 of a graduate program they have to have here. And then 1/4 has to be actually taken at EKU courses. And again, limitations can exist based on the programs. You might run into those in some graduate level degrees. And then a lot of these times, unless it's specified, these will land in their electives, which will meet hours. But sometimes if they're spelled out in an academic agreement, they can be applied towards major requirements as well, but that's up to the department. And that's just some more information about transfer work. This entire slideshow is what I use for the whole year. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to skip a lot of this stuff because Lisa Cox comes in and talks about the transfer process. So I am no expert. I am nowhere near the expert that she is. So I'm going to skip through some of these slides because they are hers. So, and get to the other pieces. Military credit, like I said, I don't want to go into a whole lot of detail on that because I'm going to have Nick and Ben come in and do those pieces. What I will say is we are looking at ways to make that more efficient to where the student can let us know how much or what credits they want applied from their JST instead of just loading it onto their transcript without looking at it to see what's going to be beneficial to their degree progression. And if anyone has any questions about that, I'll have their information in here. They're on the global email list. Vincent Thomas and Nick Wenzel, they're both very good. Very good. I work with them just about every day. MOUs and agreements, this is the easiest way. And I'll tell you a story. I was talking with an advisor for a graduate program, and she reached out to me and said, I've got all these students that are coming in and they have this certain certification. It was in safety, the Masters of Safety, Security, and Emergency Management. And she reached out and she said, they're coming in with this certified safety professional. And in order to take this exam, they have to have a bachelor's degree. So we know that they're at graduate level. And I'm just wondering if there's any way that we could, if they would be eligible. So we go to look, and I contacted the chair, and we worked through an agreement to where the skills and the outline, it was already laid out by a third party. This national organization had already articulated what it meant, what you needed to have to be successful to earn this licensure or certification. And so we were able to align those learning outcomes up with some courses at EKU, and we're able to get an agreement in place to where students that come in with this degree or with this certification, this industry certification, non-collegiate, they can get 9 credits of graduate level credit in their program. And they're not just sitting in electives, they're actually major requirements. So they see the value in not allowing or not having students sit and repeat information that they've already gone through a whole other process to be licensed in, that's recognized out in the industry and workforce. And when we got through the process, she was kind of hesitant, and I was like, it's going to be great. It's going to be great. Just hang in there with me. So we got the agreement done, and then she put her first one through, and we do this through currently we're doing it through the credit for non-collegiate instruction form. And she called me and she said, I think I did something wrong. I said, well, what is it? And she said, I'm looking at the form. I'm like, no, you've got everything on here. You've got this. And, no, it looks good. She was like, but it was too easy. And I was like, yes, that's the whole process. So when you see things out there like this, and you see that this, especially if they have a licensure or a certification or something, if they have this and it aligns with this in your curriculum, let me know. Let's have a conversation. Maybe it's that they don't have enough for a whole course, but maybe a combination of trainings, and this licensure might equal a course. We allow the faculty to be as flexible as they want and as creative as they want. We have a lot of different ways that we've lined out agreements. And basically what the articulation agreement is, it's the agreement between EKU programs or other institutions. We also have one right now with the Southeast South Central Educational Co-op. So we have some bodies that we have MOUs or agreements outside of our institution, but a lot of the things that we're looking for with credit for prior learning are agreements within ourselves that say the fire and safety folks over in justice and safety have said that this fire inspector certification is equivalent to this course, and this is how they prove it. So the benefit of these credit by agreements is going to be that the faculty have had input, but they only have to review it on the front end of that agreement to get that agreement into place. After that, the efficiencies come in that we have the agreement, the faculty have already reviewed it. It's reviewed every 3 years. And the advisors at that point, when a student comes in and says, hey, I've been a firefighter. I heard that you all have credit for prior learning. Can I get credit for that? The advisor can submit that paperwork, and it just sometimes it's a few hours before it's added to their transcript. Sometimes it's a little longer. But it creates quick efficiencies for things that faculty have already vetted, and it's been aligned to the curriculum in their programs. So that's the articulation agreement. And again, non-collegiate, when we talk about non-collegiate, we're talking about any organization that's not directly affiliated with higher ed or a non-Title IV granting post-secondary institution. So a lot of people will say, well, I have this associate's degree, but it's actually a license or a credential. It's not it's a non-collegiate credential. So we look, those are the easiest routes, but we also have other ways of doing things as well. So if you think you might have things in your program, please reach out to me, and we can work on those. Again, like I mentioned with the safety, security, and emergency management, it removes hurdles for students. So right off the bat, when students come in, they have their application to their program, they can put that in their program stuff that says, if you have a CSP, you're eligible for this many credits. So they can put those out there immediately when students come in. They're not waiting till the last semester to get things moved around on their transcripts. It makes it easier for advising, efficiency for faculty and staff. Because we have these agreements, faculty are not tied up looking at I think there's been probably, I'm going to say probably 10 of these that have been sent in since the agreement's been in place, and the faculty has not had to review it once. So it saves faculty time, and then the advisors, it's just another form that they fill out, and then it's off, and it's automatically routed and applied to the transcript, and then the transcript folks let us know when it's been applied. We let the student know. It's just quick and easy. And it's documented. We've documented our compliance in the whole process. This is a sample of an agreement. And I don't know if you guys can see this or not. I'm going to zoom in on this. And you'll see this in the slides that I send. For instance, this one is for Management 320. So we have an agreement, and a lot of the stuff is pretty standard. But one of the things that it mentions on the first page of the agreement is that, as detailed in Appendix A, this completion of exams in human resource management. So if they have a human resource management, if they're a SHRM CP or an SHRM SCP, and they have that licensure and they can prove that, then they have met the qualifications as determined by the faculty to have met the student learning outcomes for Management 320. And at that point, since we have this agreement, the advisor can just submit this credit for non-collegiate instruction form, and it's routed through for approval and then applied to the transcript. Really simple. There's a QR code of that if you want to look at the whole agreement, but I'll also send you a list of resources that lists all of our agreements that we have in place. It's public record, so you can look through all of those and get samples. We have lots of different examples for those. Proposing a new agreement, reach out to me, and I can work with you. I've learned how to make this as streamlined as possible to make it easier on you. That's my whole job, is to make life easier and credit for prior learning easier on you. Just reach out to me and we'll look at that. Credit by exam. Does anybody have, before I move on, does anybody have any questions about credit by academic agreement? Nope. Okay, I'm trying to move fast and get to everything before we finish. Credit by exam, these are going to be things like the CLEP. If you haven't heard of CLEP, it's the college level examination program. So a lot of times they can CLEP out. You may have heard. So if maybe they didn't do so well on their ACT, or they're just not great test takers, but they know that they're really good in math, maybe they could take a math course and CLEP out. I don't know exactly all the courses that are available. This is where Samantha Pierce comes in. There is if you do examination, credit by exam, EKU, it'll probably take you to the EKU testing portal, and there's all kinds of exams on there. There's advanced placement programs, what we give credit for, like what the scores are on the AP that you have to have in order to get, 3 credits or 6 credits or whatever it is at EKU. It lists all that. The IB credit, I think there's only like one school around here that does the International Baccalaureate. And I don't know a whole lot about those. I've never seen any come in or any requests for that. Lisa Cox may have a little bit more information about that. She's probably seen a lot more of those than I have. But there's not many of them out there around us anyway. Cambridge exams is another one. I haven't seen any of those come through. Again, Samantha Pierce may have, but I haven't seen any. Departmental exams follows a little bit of a different thing, and basically it flows through the credit for prior learning process, in that the department has established several exams. And basically, so for instance, if someone comes in with, and I'm just making this up, if they come in with a CAD, like if they're engineering and they have like a certified auto, or whatever that CAD stands for, it's like a drafting, computer aided drafting. If they have computer aided drafting and they know that they could pass the course, there's an exam that they can do through the department that says, okay, they've done this. And then it will go through, just like with the agreements, the department will reach out and say, this person has passed this exam, and they'll submit a credit for non-collegiate instruction, and it goes through the whole process, just like with the academic agreements. And then there's Dante's. It's not only military, but a lot of those are for military specializations, non-traditional educational support. A lot of those you might see in your military students, mainly, is what I've seen. Again, this is Samantha's area, so I'm not gonna go into a whole lot of detail about that. But again, it's covered by policy 4.2.1. All of these, we can share information of what we have available, but we can't guarantee credit for any of these forms of credit for prior learning until they've gone through the review process. And then portfolio and academic agreements, we can show them the academic agreements and tell them what we have on file, but they actually can't apply for that until they've been an admitted student. Same way with portfolio. And these are just some things with exams. We'll go over more of that in the specific section. If you're interested in that, sign up for that one. Credit for portfolio, here at EKU, we have, and I thought I put this in here. Yes, I'm gonna flip forward. We have two different types of portfolios, and after the big concept, how many of you all just give me a thumbs up if you've heard of portfolio? Yep. Lots of people. Yeah, so a lot of times people think portfolio is this big, huge project, right? And it is for the experience, it can be. But what we have found is there are a lot of students out there that have certain certifications. Maybe they're a licensed paramedic, or maybe they have their first responders, or they have life support and first responder, the CPR card. But we don't have an agreement for that yet. We're working towards it, but maybe we don't have an agreement for it in place. But again, it's just like those academic agreements. There's a third party group like the American Heart Association that has a list of outcomes that students have to meet, or that folks have to meet in order to have this licensure. We can review those and say, oh yeah, they'd be eligible for this EMC class, this one credit class. But if they don't have an agreement in place, then it will go through a portfolio, because at that point, since the faculty have not reviewed it on the front end, it still requires faculty input. So we still have a lot of these, and it may not be appropriate every single time. Like an agreement process may not be appropriate every single time. Maybe the faculty wants to look at, oh, well, if they have this certification and then something else, then we'll grant it. So if it can't be put in an academic agreement, but it's because of a licensure or a workforce credential, that's one type of portfolio, and those are significantly quicker. And that's about 90% of I'd say, well, like I said, I've only seen one experiential learning portfolio come through in my time of doing this. So that industry and workforce credentials portfolio is most of what we see, because when we share what the experiential learning portfolio is, it's a little bit more of an extended process. There's some back and forth. They have to talk with the faculty member and the subject matter expert, and then they have to identify the student, they're given the student learning outcomes, and then they have to explain. So if they don't have a credential, then they have to go through and do a narrative for each of those student learning outcomes to document that they have met those student learning outcomes for the course before we can give them credit. So most of the time, a lot of students, when they hear that, how much work is involved in, and it's doable. I mean, it's completely doable. But when they hear about the amount of work that goes into it, they're not willing to do that. A lot of times they just want to, they'll take the course. Plus, if they're getting financial aid, it's covered in their financial aid anyway. Portfolio used to have a fee attached to it. We have removed that. So again, we're going to be leaning more towards ways to review these industry and workforce credentials, but we still do have a lot of potential students reaching out saying, I've worked for this office for 25 years and I'm thinking about coming back and getting my bachelor's degree in business or whatever. Then at that point, we turn it over to the faculty after they become a current EKU student. This part, neither of these portfolios, they don't go any further until they are admitted students, because it involves the faculty time. And if it's an extensive amount of faculty time, then we have to pay them to review these. So we're looking at ways to get those agreements in place so that they review it once and it's more efficient for everybody involved. Does anybody have any questions about this? And I'll have this handout linked in the resources that I send to you all. I send this a lot of times to students, potential students, prospective students. It just gives some different examples, what it is, the types of materials. And so, again, a lot of the benefits for a portfolio review is that it values their experiences like on student success anyway. It increases student engagement and confidence. Even if it's just one credit, a lot of students are so appreciative that EKU, a university, has honored and recognized their learning as important enough to be articulated on a transcript. It also demonstrates collegiate level learning. So it's a pretty meticulous process, at least the experiential learning portfolio. It helps our retention, similar to all of the other credit for prior learning benefits to the university students and faculty and staff. We just went over that. This is a different one. This is the okay, so how academic is awarded. So currently, we are doing this via the credit for non-collegiate instruction form. This is only for current students. We cannot apply credit to people that are not students. So basically, regardless of how it's assessed, if it is recommended that credit should be awarded, this is basically a DocuSign that the advisor, the faculty member, someone else can complete. The student cannot complete this, but they will complete this form, and it requires the approval of the chair of the department of the course where the course is housed, not necessarily the student's major, but the chair of the department where the course is housed, the dean, the graduate dean if it's a graduate level course, then it goes to the registrar, and then it goes to articulation and transfer to be applied to the student's transcript. Supporting documents are usually listed on there. So if it's like for a certification, then they would upload that certification or licensure or workforce transcript so that they could document that this student has actually met the requirements of the agreement. One of the things I always like to point out when we're talking about credit for, how these are awarded, and everything we do is about language and the actual definitions and the right words for this. So there's course waivers, and then there's credit for prior learning. A lot of people on these instruction forms, they'll say waive this course. Well, we never want to use the word waiving a course, because that's waiving a degree requirement, when in actuality, we're recognizing the student that they've already done that. We're not waiving the requirement. We're allowing their prior learning to meet that course requirement. So another thing is that these credit for prior learning awards are not done through the petitions process. Waivers are done through the petitions process. So two differences there, and I can clarify a little bit more if you want to reach out. So inquiries, prospective students, what this looks like. We have several ways that students reach out. Currently, we have a CPL survey. We're working on one thing. Let me back up one really quickly. How the academic credit is awarded currently, it is for through the credit for non-collegiate instruction form. We are working with Slate to create a way that this can be done through that process. It's a huge bill. And I love the folks over in Slate. They've been so helpful and so insightful on how the best ways to do this. So eventually we'll be moving to a new process, but for now it's the credit for non-collegiate instruction form. Prospective students, currently they will fill out there's a portal that we're working on, and it's very close to being finished. And inquiries will be prospective students will be directed there. There's a way that they can find my advisor, which is their enrollment counselor. And then and that's based on what major they are looking into. And then there's a survey that they can complete that tells us a little bit more about, what experience they have. Do they have any licensures? Do they have certifications? What are they seeking to do? Are they looking for graduate level? Are they looking for undergraduate level? Do they have prior college? It has a lot of different information in it that helps us determine where to best put this student or how to advise them. All this is housed on the application side of Slate, because they're not current students, but they are tagged. So as soon as they submit that form, that survey, and I usually always recommend that they do that, then they are coded, and I don't know what system out there, I don't even know if I'm using the right language, but they're tagged as credit for prior learning. They'll have a CPL code. And so if they go on to eventually, what we're hoping is if they go on to become admitted here at EKU, we also share that information, share those opportunities of the free application. Then we can also pull that information. Eventually, we'll be able to pull that information in that they had requested this, what they're looking for. It's just another way for us to collect information so that the student doesn't have to repeat it after they become admitted. So then we make recommendations. We'll share the established CPL opportunities. We'll share that list of agreements that we have that outline different credentials. And then we recommend other options. So we're always open to looking at portfolio if that's an option. Again, we can't do that until they're admitted. And then we direct them to the free application. Since there's no cost, there's really no, it doesn't obligate them to take courses. So we always ask them to do that so that we can house the information and we can upload transcripts, and it gives us a better idea of not only me, but like Military and Veterans Affairs and the Office of Articulation and Transfer, to get a better view of what the student could be eligible for, and to better advise them. And then lastly, we document. We're working on a way. Currently, I document things a lot in the interactions in the student's timeline on the application side. And if they're current students, it would be on the success side. Eventually, we're hoping that information will flow into Advising 360, so that you'll be able to see that information if one pops up on your advising list. For current students, we have different ways that we're receiving the information. Sometimes it's a direct email. Sometimes they pick up the phone and call. Again, they also have a survey that is going to be directed specifically towards current students. So they're going to have more opportunities because they can actually submit for a portfolio review. They can talk to their advisor. They actually have an advisor. And they also access things from the website as well. The way that we do these is currently they're routed after the request is made. It's routed to the student's advisor. One of the things that we like for them to do, the reason we route them to the advisor is probably the most important component to this whole process, because the advisors are going to be looking at their degree requirements. And we don't want to just we don't want to offer CPL opportunities that are just going to land them in electives unless they just need hours. But we really want to make sure that we're connecting them with things that are working towards their degree completion. So that's where the advisor is going to know where they're at, what's going to be beneficial to them, and have that communication with the student. Eventually, a lot of this will be automatic. But they're still the advisors are going to be notified on that once that request is made. Other areas could be included. Many times, I talk to Lisa Cox on a daily basis. The Office of Articulation and Transfer Services, Veterans, the Office of Military and Veterans Affairs, they may be involved because those are areas where they can have either more credits, or they might have, with the veterans, they may have some financial aid things that can assist. Review the advisor. Either the advisor can look to see if we have those agreements in place, and a lot of the ones that have those are very well aware of those. Fire safety, their advisor she's wonderful. I don't know how she manages it all, but they know all about the agreement, so it's not something they're going to have to seek out. Or if they do, if it's a new area, they'll reach out to me and I'll direct them in the right way. And then they're going to gather any material. So like if they have a licensure, they'll have that. If it does need to go to a faculty, then it'll be routed there. Otherwise, it'll just be attached to the document, the DocuSign, and moved on. Then the determination is made, whether it's approved or denied. There's different processes for that, and it'll be different based on the type of credit for prior learning it is. And then always the results and recommendations are documented in the student notes. It's preferred that it's either in Slate or Advising 360 somewhere, to where we're not having to bounce all over campus, because a lot of these students, they're eager to get started and they're eager to get their work done. And they may call me, but then they're also talking to an advisor and a faculty member and a chair. And, you know, before an hour is over with, if they haven't gotten a notification, I get a call from the president's office. So we want to make sure that everything's being documented so everybody sees the same information. One of the things, just noting, we cannot guarantee approval of credits to the student. We don't even say that. We'll say it's been routed for approval. But we can't tell them that it's been approved or that they've been awarded that until it's actually been applied to the transcript. I always try to note that in there. And then non-definitive language should be used when communicating about potential awards with students. So we don't say, you have been awarded, congratulations. We don't do that until we actually get the notification that's been applied to the transcript. Because we don't, you know, something may come up that other people did not see. Any questions about those? And this is just a copy of what the non-collegiate instruction form looks like. So they have the information here, the student name, and this is a great way for us to pull data out as well. Moving right along. Any thoughts or feedback that you all have? Questions? Thank you all for coming today, and I appreciate your attentiveness and your interactions. Everyone have a good rest of the day, and I hope to see you in future sessions.